My high school teacher made my life a living hell. He humiliated me in front of everyone, twisted the truth to control me, and turned my friends against me. For years, I thought I was the problem, until I finally spoke up and everything changed. I was 14 when I met Mr. Carlton, my freshman year English teacher. At first glance, he seemed like one of those cool teachers. You know the type, makes jokes, talks about movies, acts like he gets teenagers. I actually looked forward to his class that first week. Thought I'd lucked out, but that changed fast. By week 2, I noticed something off. He had this way of picking one student every semester to focus on, like really focus on, make examples of them, push them, humiliate them. And that year, I guess I was a lucky one. It started subtle. He'd correct me harshly in front of everyone if I stumbled over a reading passage. Other kids made mistakes too, but he never raised his voice at them. With me, it was like he enjoyed it. "You think that's how it's pronounced?" he'd say with a smirk, loud enough for the class to laugh. The first few times, I brushed it off, tried to tell myself I was being too sensitive. But then he started mocking my writing, calling it lazy, unoriginal, or childish. Said it lacked depth. One time, I turned in a personal essay about my grandfather passing away, and he read part of it aloud to class to mock it. Said it was melodramatic and trying too hard to be emotional. I just sat there, feeling like my face was on fire. I laughed along with everyone else because I didn't know what else to do. I hated myself for it. And the worst part, he acted like he was doing me a favor, like he was helping me toughen up or face the real world. I didn't say anything to my parents at first. I mean, who was going to believe me over a popular teacher who everyone else seemed to like? But something in me started to change after that. I became quieter, more anxious. And every time I walked into room 207, I felt like I was walking into a war zone. I had no idea how bad it was going to get. By the time October rolled around, I couldn't hide how I felt anymore. I dreaded English class. I had stomach aches almost every morning. My grades were slipping, not just in his class, but in others too. I didn't care. I was exhausted from trying to stay invisible. But Mr. Carlton never let me be invisible. One day, he handed back our essays, and mine had a huge red D+ at the top. I'd worked on that paper for days. I stayed up late, proofread it twice, and even asked my older cousin to read it over. But apparently it lacked voice and missed the assignment's intent. When I asked him after class what I did wrong, he didn't even look up from his desk. He just said, "You're not college material. Might want to accept that now and stop wasting my time." I remember standing there, stunned, waiting for him to laugh or say he was joking. He didn't. I told my friend Ava what he said. She kind of shrugged and said, "Yeah, he's just tough love. He did that to Marcus last year too. Don't take it personally." But that was the thing. I did take it personally. How could I not? He had a way of getting under your skin, of twisting your words, and making you feel stupid for even opening your mouth. And the worst part? Other teachers knew about it. I overheard one of them in the hallway say, "Carlton's got another project this year." With a chuckle, they all just accepted it. I felt completely alone. Eventually, I tried to keep my head down. Gave short answers. Faked sick once or twice a week just to skip his class. I told the nurse I had migraines. I was getting good at lying, something I never used to do, but the more I tried to hide, the more he pushed. He'd call on me randomly, correct me for things no one else got in trouble for. Once, I forgot to write my name on a quiz, and he tore it up in front of class. I pretended not to care, but I went home and cried in the shower so no one would hear me. And still, I told no one the full story. Because deep down, I thought maybe he was right. Maybe I really wasn't smart enough. Things didn't just stay between me and Mr. Carlton. He had this way of getting other students involved, without them even realizing it. It started with little things. He'd make these snide comments like, "Well, I'm sure Claire's answer would be interesting." And everyone would laugh. Not because the joke was funny, but because they didn't want to be his next target. And honestly, I didn't blame them. I started laughing too sometimes at myself just to keep the tension low. But it got worse. He once asked the class to vote on the best essay anonymously. They passed papers around, and everyone had to rate each one from 1 to 10. He didn't say whose was whose, but mine had my handwriting on it. Everyone knew it was mine. Guess what score it got? A 3. Out of 10. He made a big show out of it. "Claire, looks like your writing isn't landing with your audience," he said, flipping the paper onto my desk like it was garbage. The room went silent. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. That night, I went home and deleted every poem I'd ever written. Stupid, I know, but it felt like I was deleting this version of myself that wasn't worth keeping. Even outside of class, things started shifting. A couple of girls I used to sit with at lunch stopped inviting me. One of them told me, "You kind of make things awkward now." I didn't ask why. I already knew. Carlton poisoned the air around me. He never said anything outright cruel. Not the kind of stuff you could take to the principal. It was always just subtle enough to pass as discipline or constructive criticism. But it chipped away at me every single day. I'd walk into school with my stomach in knots, already bracing for whatever he'd throw at me. And it wasn't just about grades or behavior. He made me feel like me as a person was somehow wrong. And the scary part? I started to believe it. By the time January came around, I wasn't raising my hand anymore. I didn't even take notes the same way. I sat in Mr. Carlton's classroom like a statue, rigid, anxious, just trying not to breathe too loud or exist too brightly. I learned the hard way that even being quiet didn't shield me from a spotlight. If anything, it made him more curious, like he sensed fear and fed off it. One Monday morning, we were given a writing assignment. Describe a time you showed strength. I wrote about my mom, how she worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and still made time to attend every school play, every late-night science fair, even if she had to come straight from the diner in her uniform. It wasn't a sob story. I genuinely admired her. I felt proud to be her daughter. I said so. The following week, Carlton read excerpts from our essays aloud, something he'd started doing to celebrate strong writing. When he got to mine, I felt a little thrill of anticipation, until he opened his mouth. "So Claire thinks her mom is a role model for being disorganized, overworked, and tired. That's inspiring, I guess," he said with his smug half-laugh, looking around the room like he'd just delivered some hilarious punchline. I froze. My heart sank so fast I felt dizzy. That's not what I wrote. Not even close. I opened my mouth to object, quietly, just enough to correct him. "That's not what I said." But he cut me off immediately. "Oh, I'm sure it sounded better in your head. It's okay, memory is fluid. You probably didn't mean it like that." The class laughed. Not all of them maliciously, but in that uncomfortable way people laugh when they don't want to be the next target. I shrunk into my seat, cheeks burning. I wanted to disappear under the desk. That moment haunted me for days. I went back and read my original essay again, just to be sure I hadn't somehow misphrased something. But no, I hadn't. He twisted it. It wasn't just that he mocked me. It was how he did it. With a smile, with this slow, deliberate tone that made me feel like I was the crazy one for reacting. Like I was too sensitive. Like I'd imagined the insult. That was the day I realized Mr. Carlton didn't just make jabs. He manipulated reality. And it worked. I stopped talking about what was happening. I didn't want to sound like a winner or a drama queen. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I needed to be tougher. Maybe this was just how the real world worked and I wasn't ready for it. But deep down, something in me knew better. Something quiet and scared. Something that started whispering, "This isn't normal, and it isn't okay." By February, the tension in Mr. Carlton's class had evolved into something eerily quiet and sharp-edged. It wasn't just me avoiding eye contact with him anymore. It was everyone. But something else started to shift that month. Something harder to define. It wasn't just Carlton's comments that made me feel small. It was the sideways glances from classmates when I spoke, the awkward silences after I shared an idea, the subtle way people stopped sitting next to me or asking for help on group projects. I couldn't tell if it was in my head, or if they were reacting to the way Carlton treated me. But the more he cut me down in front of them, the more isolated I felt. Like they didn't want to be associated with me, like I was radioactive. And Carlton? He leaned into it. He started using me as the class counterexample. One day, after another round of me getting the "is that what you meant to say?" treatment during a discussion about To Kill a Mockingbird, he said to the class, "Notice how Claire is so eager to contribute, even when she hasn't really thought things through. That's bold, risky, even." I laughed nervously. That's not really fair. And that's when he tilted his head and looked straight at me, voice calm and sharp as a scalpel. "Claire, if you're going to dish out opinions, you have to learn how to take critique. You're not the victim here." That phrase, "you're not the victim here," burned into me like a brand, because I wasn't trying to be a victim. I was just trying to be a student, a normal student, in a normal classroom. But every time I opened my mouth, he weaponized it. He reframed everything I said into something embarrassing or naive, then turned around and acted like I was a problem for reacting. What's worse, some students started quoting him. At first it was light teasing. Someone would say, "You're not the victim here," in the hallway, and smirk. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like they were joining in. I started eating lunch in the library. I told my friends I needed quiet, that I was behind on homework. In truth, I didn't want to hear his voice in their mouths. Even my best friend, Lena, started pulling away. She wouldn't say anything outright, but she stopped texting first. She stopped walking with me to class. It felt like I was becoming this untouchable thing, contaminated. And the scariest part? I couldn't prove any of it. Carlton was always just careful enough, just calm enough, just reasonable enough. To anyone else, I was just a sensitive student who couldn't handle a firm teacher. But I knew better. He wasn't teaching anymore. He was performing. He was curating humiliation, wrapping it in professionalism, and serving it with a smile. And everyone applauded. Mr. Carlton had this habit. He'd ask about your goals, your passions, like he really cared. It always started with that disarming smile, like he was letting you in on a secret. "Claire," he once asked me after class, "do you want to be a writer?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, actually, I've been writing short stories since middle school." He nodded slowly, almost like he approved. "Good," he said. "That explains a lot." I smiled. That little rush of being seen by someone smart, someone you're supposed to look up to, that mattered. I thought maybe we were turning a corner, but it didn't last. The next week, he returned one of my essays, an analysis of Lord of the Flies. I'd worked hard on it, researching symbolism, rewriting it twice. I was proud of it. When he handed it back, he tapped his red pen against the paper and said, loudly in front of the whole class, "You write like someone who wants to be published, but has never been edited." The room went still. He smiled that thin-lipped smile again and added, "It's ambitious, but maybe too ambitious. You get carried away." I felt my face burn. I looked down, hoping the floor would swallow me whole. My grade? A 72. "See me after class," scribbled next to it. After class. I asked him what I could have done better. His response? "You write emotionally. That's not necessarily a strength in academic writing. Your voice is loud, but your logic is soft." Loud, soft, all the wrong kind of words. I walked home in a fog, the essay clenched in my hand. I didn't show it to anyone, not even my parents. I couldn't stand the idea of them reading the red marks, the little arrows, the circled word dramatic next to a paragraph I was actually proud of. That night, I opened my Google Docs and stared at the blank page where a short story used to be. I deleted it, and I didn't write again for months. Carlton knew how to touch the parts of you that were still growing, the dreams not fully formed, and twist them until they didn't feel like yours anymore. I stopped raising my hand. After that, I gave short answers. I kept my essays simple and dry. Nothing that could be interpreted as ambitious. But he still found ways to dig. "I expected more from you, Claire. You seemed promising at the start." Every time he said that, it was like being punched in the gut. How could I tell anyone that the very person assigned to guide my growth was the one making me shrink? I didn't want to admit that he'd made me afraid of the thing I loved most. But that's what toxic people do. They don't just hurt you, they make you hurt yourself. By spring, the isolation wasn't just coming from Mr. Carlton. It was creeping into my friendships, too. The poison he spread was subtle but powerful, and somehow it worked on people I trusted. I remember the day clearly. I was sitting with my group at lunch, the usual chatter and laughter filling the cafeteria, when someone dropped a comment that hit me like a punch. "Maybe Carlton's right about you, Claire," my once close friend Jenna said, barely looking up from her phone. "You get so defensive all the time. Like, maybe you do take things too personally." I blinked. Was this really coming from her? Jenna was the one I'd leaned on through so much. The one who promised she'd always have my back. But now, she was echoing the teacher who made my life miserable. I tried to explain how Carlton twisted my words, how he singled me out, but she just shook her head. "You're probably overthinking it. Everyone says he's tough but fair. Maybe you just don't handle criticism well." It felt like the air was sucked out of my lungs. How do you fight when the people you love start doubting you? From then on, I noticed other cracks. Invitations to hang out stopped coming. Inside jokes no longer included me. When I tried to speak up in class, I caught those sideways glances, the ones that said, "There she goes again." I wanted to scream, to tell everyone the truth. But I was scared. Scared of being labeled the problem. Scared of losing what little connection I had left. The worst part? I wasn't just losing friends. I was losing myself. I started questioning if maybe I was really too sensitive. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Mr. Carlton was right, and I just couldn't take the heat. But deep down, I knew the truth, and that truth was breaking me. Spring turned into early summer, and every day in Mr. Carlton's class felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella. The pressure, the humiliation, the loneliness, it all piled up until I felt like I was drowning. One afternoon it happened. We were doing a group project, and somehow I was paired with 3 classmates who had started avoiding me outside of school. They didn't say it, but I could feel their annoyance every time I suggested an idea. When it was my turn to present our section, I stumbled over my words. Nothing major, just a few pauses. But Mr. Carlton sees a moment like a shark smelling blood. "Well, Claire," he said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "maybe if you practice a little instead of daydreaming, you wouldn't sound so unprepared." The whole class snickered. The sting of embarrassment burned my cheeks hot. After class, as I packed my things, I overheard 2 of my group members whispering. "Honestly, I don't know why he even tries." One said, "He's clearly not cut out for this." I froze. They were talking about me. That night, I sat in my room, heart pounding, tears streaming down my face. I felt utterly invisible and completely exposed all at once. It was the first time I seriously thought about giving up, on writing, on school, on trying to prove myself. But as dark as that night was, something inside me snapped. I realized I couldn't keep living under his shadow. I couldn't let him control my story anymore. I started researching how to report a teacher's behavior. I talked to my parents cautiously, showing them the essays and the notes I'd kept. At first, they were skeptical. They'd heard good things about Mr. Carlton, and they thought maybe I just needed to toughen up. But when I showed them the emails I'd sent asking for help and his cold, dismissive replies, they started to believe me. It wasn't just me. It was real, and it was wrong. Once my parents finally understood how bad things had gotten, they didn't waste any time. We scheduled a meeting with the school counselor and the principal. I was terrified, but also relieved, like finally, someone might see what I'd been living through. The meeting was awkward. Mr. Carlton was there, of course, calm and collected like he always was. He denied everything at first, said I was misinterpreting his feedback, and that he held all students to the same high standards. I wanted to scream, tell them how he made me feel small every day, how he made my classmates turn their backs on me, how he destroyed my love for writing. But all I could do was sit there and nod, my voice stuck somewhere in my throat. The counselor asked if I wanted to stay in his class. I shook my head no. After that meeting, the school promised to monitor the situation. They moved me to a different English class, which helped a little, but the damage was done. Mr. Carlton didn't stop. Behind the scenes, I heard whispers that he was telling other teachers I was a problem student, the kind who couldn't handle pressure. Some days, I still saw him in hallways, eyes cold and dismissive. I felt like he was daring me to give up again, but I refused. I started seeing a therapist to help me deal with the anxiety and self-doubt that had taken over. I joined the school's creative writing club, a place where I could finally be myself and not fear judgment. It wasn't perfect. I still had nightmares about those classrooms, about being the joke. But I was fighting back in every small way I could. I was learning that toxic people only have as much power as you give them, and I was done giving him any. After switching classes, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders, but the scars Mr. Carlton left didn't disappear overnight. Every time I sat down to write, a little voice in my head whispered, "What if you're not good enough?" What if he was right? But I wasn't going to let that voice win. Joining the creative writing club was like stepping into a new world. For the first time in months, I was surrounded by people who didn't judge or mock my ideas. They celebrated them. We shared stories, gave feedback, and encouraged each other. It felt like a safe place, a place where I could breathe and grow. My therapist helped me unravel years of self-doubt and guilt. I learned that Mr. Carlton's words were not my truth, but his poison. I started practicing self-compassion and realized that my worth wasn't tied to his approval. Slowly, I began to write again. Not for grades, not for anyone else, just for me. I poured my feelings onto the page, pain, hope, fear, and strength. Every word was a small victory against the silence he tried to impose. And with each story, each poem, each late-night scribble, I reclaimed a part of myself he had tried to crush. It wasn't easy. Some days, the past haunted me. But I knew healing was a journey, not a destination. And this time, I was ready to walk it on my own terms. After leaving Mr. Carlton's class behind, I realized that healing wasn't just about escaping him. It was about rebuilding everything he'd chipped away. My confidence, my friendships, even how I saw myself. At first, I kept to myself a lot. I was scared to open up again. I worried people wouldn't believe me. Or worse, that they'd judge me for letting things get that bad. But the Creative Writing Club became a lifeline, a place where I could be honest without fear. Slowly, I started talking more, sharing not just my writing but my story. To my surprise, a few friends began to listen, really listen. They didn't dismiss me or tell me to get over it. They believed me. One afternoon, Ava, who'd been quiet for a while, pulled me aside. "You're stronger than you think, Claire," she said softly, "and you don't have to face this alone." That moment was huge for me. It reminded me that friendships can be healing, that not everyone will turn away when you're vulnerable. I also started speaking up more in other classes, testing my voice in smaller ways. Sometimes I still felt that old fear creeping in, the fear of being wrong, of being humiliated, but I pushed through it. Every time I did, I felt a little braver. Mr. Carlton's shadow wasn't gone, but it was starting to fade. And with every step forward, I was reclaiming not just my voice, but my life. Even as I moved forward, there were moments when the past crept back in, unexpected flashes of humiliation, that sinking feeling of being small and powerless all over again. Sometimes I catch myself flinching when a teacher raised their voice, or feeling anxious when someone asked me to read aloud. Those were the ghosts Mr. Carlton left behind, reminders of what I'd endured. But I realized that to truly heal, I had to face those ghosts head on. With my therapist's help, I began to unpack the experience, not to relive the pain, but to understand it. I learned that his cruelty wasn't about me. It was about his need for control, his own insecurities, and the toxic power dynamics at play. I also learned to forgive, not to excuse him, but to free myself from the anger that kept me trapped. I wrote about it too. Poems and essays that poured out all the hurt and confusion. I shared some of them with my writing group, and their support made me feel less alone. Making peace didn't mean forgetting or pretending it never happened. It meant owning my story, scars and all, and using it as fuel to grow stronger. It was messy, painful work, but with each step, the weight got lighter. And finally, I started to believe I could move on. After months of healing, the darkness that once surrounded me started to lift. I caught myself dreaming again, not about escaping, but about growing, creating, and living on my own terms. The Creative Writing Club became more than just a safe space. It became a launch pad. I found mentors and friends who genuinely wanted to see me succeed. They challenged me, encouraged me, and believed in my voice even when I doubted myself. School didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. Sure, I still had bad days. I still stumbled. But those days didn't define me. I began thinking about college, about pursuing writing seriously. The idea terrified me, but it also thrilled me. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. Even Mr. Carlton faded into the background, a cautionary story rather than a looming threat. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to thrive. And while the scars would always be a part of me, they no longer controlled me. This was my story now, the one I was choosing to write. With my confidence growing, I started making plans for the future I'd almost given up on. I researched colleges with strong writing programs, reached out to teachers for recommendations, and even began drafting essays for applications. Every small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Mr. Carlton had tried to steal. I wasn't just a survivor. I was becoming a creator, an artist, someone with a voice that mattered. I also started speaking out about my experience, not in anger, but with purpose. I shared my story in writing club meetings and even volunteered to speak at a school assembly about bullying and toxic behavior. It wasn't easy. Sometimes the memories hit hard and the fear of judgment lingered. But with every word I shared, I felt lighter, stronger, more free. Friends I'd lost began to come back, drawn by the new me, someone who'd fought through darkness and refused to be silenced. The future wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was ready to write it however I wanted. It's been years since Mr. Carlton's class, but the lessons I learned there go far beyond English literature. I learned how toxic people can disguise cruelty as tough love, and how dangerous it is to let anyone make you doubt your worth. More importantly, I learned how to fight back, not by yelling or breaking down, but by reclaiming my story on my own terms. I found strength in the people who believed me, in the writing that gave me a voice, and in the resilience I never knew I had. I'm not the same scared kid who sat silently in room 207 anymore. I'm someone who knows her value, who refuses to be silenced, and who's ready for whatever comes next. If you're struggling with a toxic teacher or any toxic person, know this: you're not alone, and your voice matters. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to walk away. And it's more than okay to choose yourself. This is my story, a story of pain, growth, and finally, hope. Thanks for listening.